My phone buzzed against the glass desk, its vibration cutting through the quiet hum of my office. I was halfway through signing a contract, ink still wet on the pen, when I saw the missed call notification.
Mom.
For a moment, I just stared. She rarely called anymore. When she did, it was never warm, never casual. Just business. Always business. The voicemail icon blinked red, pulsing like a warning light. Against my better judgment, I pressed play. Her voice spilled out, crisp, cold, rehearsed. "You're out of the family business. Expect a severance, and be grateful." That was it. 20 years of loyalty. 20 years of my life poured into a legacy that was never mine to hold. Dismissed in 12 seconds. I leaned back in my chair, silk blouse tightening across my shoulders as I exhaled. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city sparkled, oblivious to the storm unraveling in my chest. My coffee sat beside me, lipstick smudged on the rim, cooling just like the words in that message. I should have felt broken. Instead, I felt strangely steady. Maybe because I'd been expecting this moment. Maybe because I'd already built something of my own, far from their shadow. Still, hearing her, cut deeper than I wanted to admit. I wasn't always this composed. Once upon a time, I was the girl desperate for a seat at the family table, the boardroom table, that is. I still remember the first time I spoke up during a quarterly meeting. I was 22, fresh out of business school, dressed in a fitted navy blazer that I thought made me look older, sharper, less like their little girl. I had stayed up for nights running numbers, building a presentation that proved a new market strategy would increase revenue by 30%. When I finally stood, slides flickering on the screen, my hands trembled around the remote. My throat tightened, but I pushed through, pouring every ounce of belief into my pitch. When I finished, there was silence. A long, suffocating silence. Then my uncle cleared his throat. "Sweetheart," he said, leaning back with a smirk, "that's adorable. But we don't gamble with real money." Laughter trickled around the table. Even my mother's lips curved, not in pride, but in agreement. My chest burned. I swallowed hard, blinking back the sting in my eyes, pretending I hadn't just been dismissed in front of the very people whose approval I craved. That night, my grandmother found me in the kitchen, still in that blazer, staring blankly at a half-eaten bowl of soup. She pressed a small leather notebook into my hands. The cover was worn, soft at the edges. "Your story matters," she whispered, her fingers curling around mine. "Don't wait for them to see it. Write it. Live it." I wanted to believe her. But the following months only hardened the truth. My ideas shelved, my voice ignored. My place reduced to coffee runs and polite smiles. I felt myself shrinking, folding into the version they preferred. Quiet, compliant, invisible. Until the day I couldn't anymore. It was another meeting, another dismissive comment, another round of chuckles at my expense. I don't remember what I said aloud, but I remember the sound of the notebook snapping shut in my hands, the scrape of my chair against the polished floor, the finality of my heels clicking out the door. I left the building that day with nothing but that notebook and a raw, unsteady resolve. If they wouldn't give me a seat at their table, I'd build my own. And I'd make it so undeniable they'd have no choice but to see me. Walking away from the family business felt like tearing out a piece of my identity. For weeks afterward, I drifted, jobless, humiliated, replaying their laughter on an endless loop. But every night, I'd open my grandmother's notebook, its blank pages daring me to write something new. I started small. A cramped apartment with peeling paint became my office. My desk was an old kitchen table. My executive chair squeaked every time I moved. I lived on instant ramen and discount coffee. My bank account a reminder that failure wasn't a poetic metaphor. It was a very real, gnawing hunger. Still, I pushed forward. I spent nights teaching myself through online courses, days sending out proposals that went unanswered. For every 20 rejection emails, one person agreed to a meeting. Most went nowhere. A few gave me just enough encouragement to keep going. Then came Evelyn. She was a woman in her 60s, silver hair cropped close, sharp eyes softened only by kindness. I'd cold emailed her from a proposal, never expecting a response. Instead, she invited me to coffee. "You've got ideas," she said, tapping the notebook I carried everywhere. "But more importantly, you've got fire. Don't let anyone, especially family, convince you you're less than what you are." Evelyn became my mentor, my anchor. She introduced me to her network, gave me advice that cut sharper than any textbook, and reminded me that resilience was a skill you sharpened with practice. The first client I landed was small, laughably so. A boutique shop owner who took a chance on me. I still remember the thrill of signing that contract, the way my hand shook as I deposited my first payment, $500. It wasn't much, but it was mine. From there, the wins came slowly, then faster. My cramped apartment office grew too small. I rented a modest co-working space. I stopped eating ramen every night, started affording fresh groceries, then furniture that didn't wobble on one leg. Every step forward felt like reclaiming a part of myself. I didn't flaunt it. Whenever my family asked how I was doing, I kept my answers vague. Busy, I'd say, or managing. I posted nothing on social media beyond the occasional picture of a latte or a skyline. The less they knew, the better. There was a strange power in invisibility. While they assumed I was floundering, I was building. Brick by brick, client by client, failure by failure. Until one day, my revenue hit 6 figures. Then 7. I walked into a luxury office lease with a check written from my own account. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Art on the walls. My grandmother's notebook framed in gold above my desk. They thought they had cast me out. What they never realized was that in doing so, they freed me. And in silence, in shadows, I had grown into something they could no longer ignore. Voicemail from my mother played on repeat in my mind all week. "You're out of the family business. Expect a severance and be grateful." What she didn't know was that by the time her message arrived, I had already built an empire far larger than anything they imagined. So when my assistant told me my family had shown up unannounced at the office reception, my mother, my uncle, even my younger brother, I almost laughed. Apparently, word had gotten out that I was working somewhere downtown. Maybe they expected to find me at a shared desk, hustling on scraps. Maybe they thought pity would be their weapon. I told security to let them in. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and there they were, clustered together in the sleek marble lobby of my firm. Their eyes darted upward, tracing the bold logo etched in gold on the wall. Harper and Company. My name. My company. I watched from the mezzanine, deliberately giving them a moment. My mother's face tightened, her composure slipping as she took in the modern design, the polished wood, the gallery of framed photographs. Our first storefront client, the cover story from Forbes, the plaque from the Women in Business Awards. My grandmother's notebook hung in the center, spotlighted, impossible to miss. I descended the stairs slowly, heels clicking against the marble. Silence blanketed the room. "Welcome," I said, my voice calm, even warm. I wasn't expecting visitors. My uncle cleared his throat, his usual swagger crumbling. This is yours." "Yes," I replied simply. "Every inch of it." My brother stared around, bewildered. "You own this?" "All of it." I smiled faintly. "More than this. But yes, this is home base." The weight of the moment stretched, thick and unbearable. They were seeing me, really seeing me for the first time. Not the girl with trembling hands and a shaky voice in their boardroom. Not the daughter dismissed with a voicemail. But the woman who had built something undeniable. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice low, strained. "Why didn't you tell us?" I let out a soft laugh. "Tell you? The last time I shared an idea, I was laughed out of the room. Do you really think I owed you updates after that?" Her gaze fell, shame flickering across her carefully composed features. I gestured around us. This is what happens when you stop waiting for permission. When you stop begging to be seen. You told me to expect a severance and be grateful. But I didn't need your severance. I created my own future. No one spoke. My words hung in the air, sharp as glass. I walked to the center of the lobby, resting a hand on the framed notebook. She believed in me when none of you did, I said softly, thinking of my grandmother. And she was right. My story mattered. Their faces told me everything: shock, disbelief, guilt. But beneath it all, something else flickered in their eyes: respect. For the first time in my life, they weren't dismissing me. They weren't underestimating me. They were standing in awe. I let the silence sit between us a little longer. It wasn't awkward, not for me. For once, they were the ones scrambling to find footing, not me. I had learned the value of quiet. Silence can be sharper than any speech. Finally, I folded my arms and looked at them the way they had once looked at me: measured, cool, unapologetic. So, I said, what is it you came here for? Pity? Money? Or just the satisfaction of confirming I failed? My uncle shifted uncomfortably. We thought you needed help. I tilted my head. Help? That's rich. My mother's voice was softer now, stripped of its usual edge. We misjudged you. We didn't realize. She gestured around the office, her hand trembling slightly. All of this. I let her words trail. They weren't enough. Not anymore. I don't owe you anything, I said, voice steady. But I'm not cruel. If you want a place in my life, there are conditions. Their eyes snapped to me, startled. Conditions. It felt good to say it aloud. I stepped closer, heels firm against the marble. First, respect. No more belittling, no more backhanded comments, no more dismissals. If you want to speak to me, you speak to me as an equal. If you can't manage that, don't speak at all. My brother shifted, guilt flickering across his face. I caught it, but I didn't soften. Second, own your mistakes. You pushed me out, you laughed at me, you told me I was nothing more than a distraction. You need to say those words out loud, not for me, but for yourselves. Because until you admit what you did, you'll never change. I looked at each of them in turn. They couldn't hold my gaze for long. And third, live better. Pursue something that isn't built on control or cruelty. My success isn't a handout for you to lean on. If you want my support, emotional or otherwise, you'll have to prove you're building something real for yourselves. The words came out with a clarity I hadn't expected. Firm, but not hateful. Compassion without compromise. My uncle's jaw worked as though chewing stones. My mother's eyes glistened, a crack in her armor. My brother finally whispered, I'm sorry. It wasn't enough, not yet, but it was a start. I took a slow breath, feeling the strength of the moment settle deep inside me. You told me once to be grateful for a severance, I said. Now, I'm telling you, be grateful for this chance. Because I don't need you here. But I'm willing to let you stay, if you choose to do better. Their silence wasn't filled with laughter this time. It was filled with something far heavier: realization. For the first time, I wasn't asking for their approval. I was giving them a choice. And they knew it. In the weeks that followed, something remarkable happened. It wasn't dramatic. There were no overnight transformations or tearful family dinners that healed years of hurt. Change came in small, almost fragile increments. My brother called one morning, not to ask for money, not to pry, but simply to tell me he'd enrolled in a business program. I want to earn something for myself, he admitted, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. For the first time, I believed him. My uncle sent me an email. No excuses, no justifications. Just a line that read, I underestimated you. I was wrong. That was all. But for a man who had built his identity on never admitting fault, it felt monumental. And my mother, well, she came to my office again, alone this time. She didn't bring paperwork or sharp words. She just stood there, looking at the framed notebook on my wall. Her lips parted as if to speak, but instead, she pressed a hand over her heart and nodded once, small, almost imperceptible. It wasn't an apology, not yet, but it was a crack in the ice. I didn't need them to fall at my feet or rewrite history. What I needed was already mine: the strength to build, the courage to stand, and the grace to walk forward without bitterness dragging me back. One evening, as the sun spilled orange across my office, I sat at my desk with that notebook open. Its pages, once blank, were now filled with my handwriting, plans, dreams, pieces of the empire I had built from nothing. I ran my fingers over the first line my grandmother had written, "Your story matters." She had been right all along. And as I looked out over the skyline, the city glowing with the promise of endless beginnings, I whispered my final truth into the quiet. They gave me a severance. I gave myself a life. And I am more than grateful. I am free.